This week on The Modified World, I'm going to teach you the basics of stretching your piercings. So stay tuned. So for years, people have been asking me, JC, what's the best way for me to stretch my ears? And, I've generally kind of avoided the topic. A lot of it is because it's not that mysterious, but it can be kind of controversial. And even though you guys might think that I attract controversy at every turn, I really don't like it. But the people have spoken. Plus, I still see, even in today's day and age, lots of people still injuring themselves and tearing themselves up improperly stretching. So I'm going to show you exactly what it is that I recommend to my clients when they're wanting to enlarge their piercings. First off, some terminology. To enlarge the piercing, we call that stretching. The word gauge is a unit of measurement. As the numbers get smaller, the size gets bigger. It pretty much stops at 00 gauge, which is about 9.5 millimeters. After that, we either measure it in fractional inches or millimeters. Tapers. Tapers are tools. They're not jewelry. They're simply tools to help you gently guide some jewelry in place. They're really not meant for forcing a piercing open. Single flare. It describes a plug that only has one flared end and one end that's not enlarged. Makes it easy to insert. Double flare, of course, has two flares on it. Double flare is really only worn when you've been at a size for a long time, because you have to it has to have some looseness to it before it'll just pop into your ear. Of course, I have another video all about terminology. Of course, the link's in the description. And while we're talking about terminology, I don't even like the term stretching. Stretching implies that you're forcing the piercing open. Really, what we're trying to do is get the piercing to just relax a little bit. Ideally, all I want to do is see people wear jewelry that fits tightly and then take time. Enough time, eventually it stops being tight, starts being loose. Well, guess what? Your piercing has just stretched. Did it all on its own with no pain, no injury or anything like that. Now, I know everybody's going to get impatient and they're going to want to use tapers, especially in the small sizes. I can usually forgive somebody, and when I say somebody, I mean a professional piercer, stretching up a client in a perfectly sterile environment with sterile, non-porous, implant-grade jewelry. But even then, when you power stretch like that, you always run a chance of tearing and breaking tissue. My suggestion, if you're having a harder time going to the next size, your ears are stubborn, they've been at the same size for a long time and they just don't seem to want to stretch, get heavier jewelry. Not only that, but glass often varies just ever so slightly in size and can help facilitate that next size up even easier. Now, I know a lot of you guys are going to ask me, well, what about taping? Well, I generally avoid taping. Why? Because the tape is porous. And there's always that little gap where the end of the spool overlaps. And that can often give people irritation. Same thing goes for using silicone eyelets to help force your ears open to the next size. Folks, that's a bad plan. And I know that YouTube is full of videos of people telling you that, oh, it's quite all right, it's fine and dandy. However, though, YouTube's also full of videos of people riding bicycles off of the roofs of houses with no helmet on. Doesn't mean it's a good idea, even if they did it and it was okay. Trust me, I've seen lots and lots of people have silicone eyelets just stuck to their piercings, practically grown into it, and seriously losing all the inside of the piercing when you take the jewelry out, just ripping it out, and that's not something you want. Another thing, you should never be using plastics or organics, bone, horn, stone, wood, any of that stuff to stretch your piercings with. sometimes even when you go slow, if you go up a little bit, the porosity and roughness of it just isn't going to go well for you. Me, myself, I only stick with the best stuff. That means glass, implant grade stainless steel, implant grade titanium, and of course my personal favorite, real solid, not plated gold. The finest of materials. As far as styles of jewelry that you want to be stretching into, you can use a single flare plug, glass or titanium. Even stainless steel is acceptable. You can use a screw together internally threaded eyelet. And I say this is important. There's not a lot of sources for internally threaded screw together eyelets. A lot of the ones you see are externally threaded, loaded with sharp edges, just waiting to damage your tender piercing. So of course you want to avoid that. Back in the day, we used to use the column plug. It's essentially a no-flared column with a couple of O-rings on it. They're very low profile and terribly inexpensive. So there's really no excuse for you to be using dodgy shit to stretch your ears. Well, so that was my show this week. Hope you learned something, possibly moderately entertained. I'm sure you'll have questions, so of course, leave them in the section down below, email them to me, hell, you can even call the shop. I will be doing videos more in depth about other body parts and any other questions that y'all happen to pop up with. So, of course, leave me your questions, section down below, or email me, tweet at me, whatever works. And of course, stop by next week for another episode of The Modified World.
What?